all want to return to the way things were before COVID-19. But there's one area where I hope we never go back: our complacency about pandemics. We can get ahead of infectious disease outbreaks. By the next pandemic, I believe we can have what I call mega testing diagnostic platforms. They can be deployed quickly, cost very little, and test 20% of the entire population every week. They can be deployed quickly, cost very little, and test 20% of the entire population every week. We also want to get treatments out far faster next time. One of the most promising is monoclonal antibodies. These manufactured antibodies grab onto the virus and disable it just like your immune system, and can reduce death rates by as much as 80%. I also think that we'll develop new vaccines quickly, in large part due to this new mRNA platform. mRNA will become faster to develop, easier to store, and lower cost. That's a huge breakthrough. To stop future pandemics quickly, we need to be able to spot disease outbreaks as soon as they happen anywhere in the world. And that requires a global alert system. If there turns out to be some new infectious pathogen, then we need a group of infectious disease responders to spring into action. Think of these as like pandemic firefighters. They're going to use their logistics, use their ability to build up capacity quickly. They're going to go wherever that problem is. Stopping the next pandemic will require a big investment, but I think of this as the best insurance policy the world could buy. You can read more about this in our annual letter.
California. And welcome to our exclusive interview with Bill Gates, the entrepreneur, Microsoft co-founder, software developer, and philanthropist. Thanks for being here.
Great to talk to you.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's annual letter has now just come out. You both write about how this pandemic, in your view, will be as defining as World War II. What are the key steps to take right now?
Well, we have to do two things at once. We have to bring this epidemic to an end, primarily by getting the vaccine out in large numbers to the entire world. And we have to make sure that we're ready because there will be another pandemic. And there's so many lessons about how we weren't prepared, how we should have handled things differently. And, when that's clearly in our mind, those investments need to be made.
You mentioned being ready for the next time. And you warned about this last time. Let's take a brief look at a 2015 warning you issued.
If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus. If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus.
15 warning you issued.
If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus. If we start now, we can be ready for the next epidemic.
How ready was the world for this, say on a scale of 1 to 10, and how about the U.S.?
The U.S. gets a low score because the understanding of how to get diagnostics up to scale early to stop the exponential spread. If that had been done well, we would have been more like an Australia or a South Korea, where the death toll is less than a tenth of the tragic situation in the United States. So we made mistakes before the epidemic in not investing more, and then during the epidemic, we also made mistakes. There's one category we did well, which was getting R&D money out to the vaccine companies. The U.S. was the biggest at that, and so at least, in that one area where we've set a model for the world.
You're very specific in your work and the letter about what should come next. You talk about a global alert system, infectious disease first responders, and germ games. Walk us through what some of that looks like, and whether you think international organizations and the Biden administration can do more on that now.
Well, the great thing is that the tens of billions required for all that preparedness, it's the insurance policy that avoids you losing tens of trillions like we are globally right now. And so it's quite a bargain, even if you only look at what it can do to help during a pandemic. But those investments can also help us improve health on a much broader basis. So the mRNA vaccine can be used for TB and HIV. We're very excited about that, and we've been funding mRNA for over 10 years, and now it's accelerated its development. And getting those early warning systems in, that'll improve health all over the world. So this time, I think people will pay attention.
Your letter also goes really...
that'll improve health all over the world. So this time, I think people will pay attention.
Your letter also goes really through a whole bunch of influences, from the movie Contagion to Winston Churchill to you and your wife's interest in confronting systemic racism and structural racism. And you write that pandemics, quote, exploit pre-existing inequalities. And you're working and doing funding with historically black colleges on testing. Walk us through, what does this mean? Why does it happen this way? Does it have to be this way? And how do you fix it?
Well, it's pretty stunning that the infection rate and death rate in minorities has been over twice as high. And that really wouldn't have been expected. In fact, we need to understand it a lot better. It's partly multi-generational households. It's partly job occupation. It may have been the ability to communicate health messages in to those households. I'm stunned at that. Sadly, I'm not stunned with the idea that the inner city schools were the least prepared with internet connections and training in order to do online education. And so the gap between the suburban schools and the inner city schools, which was already very large and a terrible inequity, it's been more dramatic in this last year than ever. And so we've got to reinvest in those schools, taking some of the good things we've learned about how we can use online tools, but helping those kids catch up.
Mr. Gates, trying to warn about pandemics and then protect people's lives during them doesn't sound that controversial. But as you know, and I think some of our viewers know, you have a lot of critics, including, for example, here's a Fox News host who is attacking you for advocating contact tracing in April. Take a look.
There's a new threat to our rights on the horizon, and it's being pushed by the second wealthiest man in the world. According to Gates, the only way to responsibly end these shutdowns is for a pretty vast surveillance system to be put in place, arguing that it will be unsafe to work or to travel or go to church or a ball game unless we give up our personal data. Well, I haven't seen the scientific proof for any of that.
Is that a
to work or to travel or go to church or a ball game unless we give up our personal data? Well, I haven't seen the scientific proof for any of that.
Is that a
to work or to travel or go to church or a ball game unless we give up our personal data? Well, I haven't seen the scientific proof for any of that.
Is that a fair assessment of what you're trying to do, and what's your response?
Well, contact tracing was incredibly beneficial in places like South Korea. And, we'd have hundreds of thousands of people alive today in the U.S. if we had done that. The data, you don't actually have to give up your personal data. That's not a fair way of describing it. Some societies really chose to make that work. Sadly, because of our mistakes in diagnostics, our numbers got so large that even the states that made an effort, the benefits of the contact tracing wasn't gigantic. So it's really as you get down in, lower infection rates, like 3-4%, then the contact tracing helps drive that down even lower.
When you look at that kind of disagreement or attack, do you see it as just ignorant or also malicious? Because there's a lot on the internet, the stuff that's not true, we're not giving airtime to, but that tries to rope you into something.
Yeah, so both myself and Dr. Fauci have featured in conspiracy theories, like one says that Dr.
Is something.
Yeah, so both myself and Dr. Fauci have featured conspiracy theories, like one says that Dr. Fauci is trying to make money off of these vaccines and various negative things about me. There are theories, like one
to rope you into something.
Yeah, so both myself and Dr. Fauci have featured in conspiracy theories, like one says that Dr. Fauci is trying to make money off of these vaccines and various negative things about me. You're encouraging people not to trust the advice on masks or taking the vaccine, and that could be damaging. It's a new phenomena. I don't know, will it hurt the vaccine uptake where everyone who takes the vaccine is not just protecting themselves, but reducing their transmission to other people and allowing society to get back to normal? So it's a completely unexpected phenomena, and sadly, a lot of it's based on false information.
Yeah, I just have one follow-up on that, which is you're known to be both effective and an optimist. What do you say to people who look at this and feel like scientists, experts, and you warned and gave the public information, and by your own assessment today, it still didn't go very well according to the government policies in charge, and you're out here still working on it? What do you say to people who are pessimistic about either failure or incompetence and lies winning out?
Well, whenever you make mistakes, you have to learn from them. And the U.S. has so much talent, so much ability to get things right, so much ability to lead the world and help. Almost every infectious disease event, so much ability to get things right, so much ability to lead the world and help. Almost every infectious disease event of the last 100 years, the U.S. Played a very strong role. The CDC is the most respected health organization. In this one, we didn't set a good example, and we even withdrew from the WHO. So, it wasn't our finest hour, but I remain optimistic, and I look at the new team that's engaged, looking at the science, being willing to deliver the bad news that the next few months are going to continue to be tough. And, I feel great that we're correcting some of the mistakes that were made.
You mentioned the new team. Was President Biden right to rejoin the WHO, and have you spoken to him recently, or will you?
I spoke to him, Melinda and I, soon after the election, and the pandemic was definitely one of the key topics there. And we're thrilled that he's rejoined the WHO, because that's where you share best practices. That's where you make sure the numbers are there to see what's going on. For example, understanding these variants that are a bit scary because they are more transmissive, and we'll get data soon on whether the vaccines are slightly less effective or not. And so, yes, it's kind of a common sense move to bring the world together, because it's us versus the disease. And every one of these vaccines involved scientists in many countries, and the trials were done in many countries. no country alone could possibly deal with this.
In the letter, you discuss how so many people are struggling, so many people grieving because of COVID, and you yourself discuss not even being able to gather in person for your father when he died in September. He was famously proud of you, and people like myself from Seattle know about his work and yours, and I did just want to play a little bit of him, if you don't mind us showing this.
Great. Let me introduce Bill Gates, the largest philanthropist in the history of the world.
How do you feel when you're able to introduce him at something?
There are no words to describe it. How much pride can you have? Whatever the highest number is, that's where I am.
Your reflections and what he taught you?
Well, my dad both, set a good example and was always willing to tell me when he thought I should do better. He personally, with Patty Stonecipher, helped create the foundation while I was still full-time at Microsoft, and so his integrity really set the culture of that organization. My dad's example is one that I'll never match, but he made so much difference, and he was always cheering me on. Loved the fact he was involved, and so it's sad. He lived a great life. He was 94 when he died, and so we did have to limit that getting together and sharing our thoughts and our grief. But no one's ever been luckier in terms of who their dad was.
He worked with you and your family on really beginning to think about and give away so much of the wealth you created, which was because you were really good at business, among other things. I have a very simple question for you, Mr. Gates. When we look at the 4 largest companies in America, we have Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, and Apple. Why are they all tech companies?
I'm biased. I think technology has done amazing things. Obviously, it's we've got to have rules about it, but wow, the magic of software, the internet, the ability to look at data, let scientists collaborate. Technology has done some phenomenal things, and so my whole life I've been evangelizing that let's take advantage of it to improve education, to improve health. There's a lot more to be done, but there's a lot of amazing work those companies are responsible for, and up until my foundation work, that was my whole focus was that work, and it continues.
You were celebrated for it. The company famously took heat for it. I'm curious, as we look out today, the government definitely went at Microsoft for alleged anti-competitive behavior. We're not here to relitigate all that today, but there's a lot of informed people who look at the big tech companies today and think they're not getting it as hard as you did. Do you think today's CEOs know how lucky they may be, and will that change?
Well, I think as you go forward, there are a lot of questions. Microsoft wasn't in the social media business where issues about political things and conspiracies and how should you draw the line on what's on there. The tech companies are so important now. It's not surprising that the governments are looking at competition, interoperability, so there are lessons. There are things that Microsoft learned as we interface with the government. I hope the others go back and look at how that all went. But it makes sense for government to care a lot about the central role of technology and making sure that we get more of the good media business where issues about political things and conspiracies and how should you draw the line on what's on there. The tech companies are so important now. It's not surprising that the governments are looking at competition, interoperability, so there are lessons. There are things that Microsoft learned as we interface with the government. I hope the others go back and look at how that all went. But it makes sense for government to care a lot about the central role of technology and making sure that we get more of the good and less of the bad.
That brings us to something that I really want to ask you about. I have a hunch you may not want to answer it much, but you're so influential in these areas, I'm going to try anyway, and that is the power of these social media companies to publish or delist and ban people is huge. And as you know, social media companies to answer it much, but you're so influential in these areas, I'm going to try anyway, and that is the power of these social media companies to publish or delist and ban people is huge. And as you know, the original concern hundreds of years ago was that the government would disappear speech. There are a lot of people, especially young people, who are more concerned about where they are online than anything the federal government might do. Are you at all concerned when tech companies can make basically unchecked decisions to take people off their platforms, that they might get the call right a lot, but then not? Any advice or thoughts on that?
There's clearly trade-offs involved where, false information, that, causes riots or people not to trust medicines or rewrites, history like Holocaust denial. How you draw the line and who's in a position to do that is a great thing for people to be debating. I haven't seen a great solution where you draw the line in a way that everybody feels comfortable with who's doing the interpretation and how it works. There's been a lot of bad stuff on social media, and I'm glad at least some of that is being held back. As you say, you might go too far, but my tech career is largely over now. I'm a champion for health. And this next generation's got to solve this problem.
Yeah, understood. You've always been your own boss, but you also have a little bit of a style that is sometimes called being boss. It's being, as you know, not whether you're technically the boss, but whether you have that confidence. And we were looking through the archives and we found a great example of this, a young Mr. Gates explaining his outlook. Take a look.
Can you see yourself working for somebody else?
I never have.
Can you see it?
Well, in the sense that we work together, but
Answering to a boss.
I'm used to having a company where the ideas that I have are something that I can easily pursue. So I think it'd be a tough transition.
How important was your confidence in addition to your innovation in your career?
Well, certainly when I was young, I had the brashness of youth to pursue ideas that seemed crazy at the time. A computer on every desk in every home, the central role of software, and I turned out that those beliefs really worked out very well, and that's why I have the wealth that now goes to the foundation and is there to try and provide healthy lives even in the poorest countries. So I'm lucky. My interests, my personality, my timing all came together. So the Microsoft fortune. So I'm lucky. My interests, my personality, my timing all came together. So the Microsoft fortune, is now being given away as best as Melinda and I can.
To lose you, I got to ask you about your role in music and culture. I read that you and Melinda like Willie Nelson and The Sound of Music, but the genre where you are cited most is hip-hop. Over 125 songs cite you, Mr. Gates, including Lil Wayne's Bill Gates and Rick Ross's Bill Gates. And the common theme here is a lot of rappers from humble roots say they're inspired by both your work ethic and your success. I wanted to ask you about just 3 of them, where you could tell us whether yes, they got it accurate, or maybe no, they're a little off. And the first is from Andre 3000. And he says what he likes about you is that you do not show off your wealth. He says Bill Gates don't dangle diamonds in your face when he Microsofted the place. Accurate or no?
Well, I lyrics aren't, the ultimate full description of people I kind of doubt. I'm very lucky. I sometimes fly in a plane. I have I don't have to worry about whether I'm going to have enough money for things like kids' education. So I hope I'm taking some responsibility for the lucky position I am in by giving my time to the foundation.
But Andre seems to like that. He doesn't think you're showy.
Well, I'll try to live up to that. I don't try to be showy.
Here's one about tax policy. This is from young New York rapper Joey Badass. He says, just had to pay like 60 stacks in taxes. Why they take a piece of my assets? Does Bill Gates have these same fees? Please, I need the answers. Is it accurate? Do some wealthy people avoid their fair share?
I paid over $10 billion.
I need the answers. Is it accurate? Do some wealthy people avoid their fair share?
I paid over $10 billion in taxes, and I think you could have a progressive tax system where people in my position would have paid more. Obviously you can go to an extreme where you hurt the incentives, but the U.S. is far short of that. And on my Gates notes, you can see some thoughts about making U.S. taxes more progressive. But I'm just one voter in that question.
And then finally, I'd love to do a lightning round where I say a word to you and you give us your thoughts in a sentence or a word, and people can see you're concise, so I don't think this will be hard for you. In a word or a sentence, 2020.
Recovery.
2021.
Normalcy.
Your microwave dinners that we've heard about.
Very dry.
And what your next TED Talk might be about.
Well, my 2010 TED Talk was about climate change. So climate change and pandemics are where I'm trying to help the world get good plans so we don't suffer the huge consequences.
Well, I want to thank you for your time. Thanks to Bill Gates for being our debut guest on the Beat Summit series with Ari Melber.
Yeah, great to talk to you.